Professor Santangelo teaches economics at Columbia University. He is an expert in international economic development, and his most recent article was published in the Asian Journal of Public Policy. The article focuses on data quality and the effects of false data on an international platform.
I find it rather distressing that we base so much as far as who gets loans, which nations get loans from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, what programs are being financed by microfinance, which nations are getting more attention than others, which nations are being allowed into the European Union, how will they benefit, how will they be a detriment, and all of this is based on the economic data that's available today. And I find it very distressing that that data is as unreliable as it actually is. Constantly in the news, we see these countries that are dealing with high levels of price fluctuation. We see them dealing with unstable currencies. We see countries dealing with instability, both political and economic. We're basing all of these beliefs on the data that's available to us today. But what we're seeing is that the historical data from 5 to 10 years ago that's being reported by these countries to the international financial institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are false. The data is faulty. We see that nations that have applied to be in the European Union are providing financial data about their country's economies that is false. We know that it's false when they submit it, but everybody wants to be in the wants to get into the party, so we don't say anything. People are allowed admittance to the European Union, and then we turn around afterwards and go, oh, wait a minute, we made a mistake when we filed the paperwork. One of the issues that comes to mind is the question of, well, who's at fault for this bad data? And what sort of fault is it? Are the people who are collecting the data unreliable in themselves? Is it bad data collection? Are they trying to hide something? Or are they just ignorant of the appropriate method of reporting the data? Now, of course, no one's at fault if they're just not good at collecting data. But if they are deliberately misrepresenting themselves to some end, inclusion into the European Union, to increase the amount of loans they get from the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank, because millions of dollars are at stake. And if someone comes to you and says, look, I'm good for it, I need money, could I borrow some money? And you look at them and you say, well, you know what, you are good for it. If a person goes into a bank to borrow money, people in the bank are going to check, how reliable are you? Will you pay me back? Well, the same thing happens when a nation goes to the World Bank and says, I'd like to borrow $40 million. The World Bank looks at their financial data and their economic financial data and says, are you reliable? Will you pay me back? If I went into a bank and lied on my bank loan application, not only would I not get the money, I may go to prison. But nations are constantly lying on their World Bank loan applications. They're being misrepresented. The question becomes, is the World Bank misrepresenting them, or are they misrepresenting themselves? And then the further question as to why are they being misrepresented? So these are all issues which truly affect us, and they affect us on a large scale. They affect nations on a large scale, because the World Bank may be burned by a specific Latin American country and then turn around and say, that's it, we're done. We're not going to loan any more money to Latin American countries. So other countries will suffer because of the misrepresentation of just one. The study that I recently did looked at policy recommendations that were made for 4 Southeast Asian economies. What's more important, controlling price fluctuation or encouraging growth? Now, the paper was written using data from the year 2001. And it was looking at historical data in 2001 over the course of the last 20 years. for these four economies. The problem occurs when I did my study in 2007, looking at the same data that they used, but the newer vintage, the more recent version of that data. You get completely different results, where you no longer say it's important to encourage growth at the expense of mild price fluctuations. Now you have to control the price fluctuations and the growth will just occur. So now something which at the time, an economist for the Philippines would go to the Philippine government and say, this is what you have to do. Well, now if I'm looking at it, I say, no, that's not what you have to do. That's bad advice. But at the time, it seemed like good advice given the data that was available at the time.